Okay. Okay. See, people are logging in, so let's give it a moment. Okay. Okay. Yeah, everybody's logging in from various parts of the world. I can see that's great. Not just Europe and the States. I see Vietnam as well. So that's pretty late there. I see Italy. That's great. Okay. So hello everyone, and welcome to today's Gala webinar. My name is Isabella Massardo. I'm content strategist here at Gala. And today we have as presenter Soren Eberhardt, who is Global Site Manager for Microsoft, if I'm not, is that still your title? Okay, he's going to introduce himself, but he's very well known within the Gala community. And Soren has a wish list for Christmas, and he's going to talk a little bit about that and maybe hear also what you guys have to say about it. So Soren, I'm going to switch off my camera and my microphone, and whenever you're ready, you can start.
And I am ready. Thank you, Isabella, for the quick intro. Yes, I will introduce myself. First, I want to introduce the topic. Actually, you're probably all aware of the fact that, well, not the language industry, but a lot of other like retail has supply chain challenges right now. So it's already late putting on a Christmas wish list. But well, I think this one is good for any time of the year. So let's get started. Yeah, well, holiday season is coming up quickly. I know that in Europe, sometimes they have the marzipan already out in the shelves of the grocery stores at the end of August. Let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Soren Eberhardt, and you see sometimes my name spelled with an OE, sometimes with an O. It's actually an umlaut, but the times of when internationalization was not as well done as it is now. Unfortunately, even Microsoft stole my umlaut at the time. I've been working with Microsoft for nearly 20 years now. I've been in the localization industry for over 25 years. And I've worked in different roles on different projects within Microsoft. I've actually been Windows, in Office. I worked on Skype quite a while. I worked on this competitor product that we have for Zoom that we're using right now. I've worked on Microsoft Teams. And now I'm a global site manager. So I'm working on our web direct pages for Microsoft 365. Mostly the pages where small and medium businesses can acquire the product. So without further ado, I want to first check with you who you work for, just because I would like to understand the audience. So can you be one of Santa's helpers in delivering that gift of a great LSP, or will you be one of the people who will help me working on that wish list? Because I would like to invite everybody who's working for a client organization to chime in, and whenever I'm talking about different aspects of what I find is important for an LSP, just feel free to add your thoughts. Everybody working with LSPs obviously has their own requirements.
Okay.
And
they're voting. I'm going to close it in 10 seconds. So, okay. Okay.
And Isabella, you didn't give anybody the option to be neither. So if anybody is a student of localization. I just followed your
instruction. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No worries. So those people.
Or you're doing something else, please type it in the chat and we'll read it out loud. So I'm going to share the results.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, we have, and I kind of expected that for this talk that we would obviously have LSPs who are interested in hearing what clients are expecting. Not that you don't hear from your clients, but sometimes it's also people just from doing the everyday work, they might not take that step back and really give you the concise like meta requirements. And yeah, great to see some people in client organizations as well. So as I said, please chime in the chat or later on when we have a discussion. So I want to talk about like different dimensions of projects. I want to talk a little bit about schedule, quality, scope, and cost as some main factors that everybody who is on the client side has to think about. Every project manager, but then also every program manager. Just those are all things that we constantly have to keep an eye on. So if you had to prioritize, and unfortunately the reality is that in many projects, we do sometimes have to make these decisions. I'm just wondering, what would you consider the most important dimension of a project out of these four? And in this case, I don't give you an open field. We will talk about additional things as well.
Okay, people are voting. Seems quality is winning. There's a question from Diego. Maybe in the meantime, we can discuss that. He says, scope includes the other three. So scope includes quality, schedule, and cost.
Yeah, I was thinking of scope more in terms of the deliverables.
Okay.
Covering all that, but yes. And yes, it is a hard question, Meredith. As I said, we often have to make these smaller trade-offs in projects.
So here we go, quality and scope, 47% both, and then cost and nothing for schedule.
Oh, that is interesting. So that is okay. That might already be an indicator where sometimes maybe clients and LSPs might disagree. But yeah, let's talk about these different aspects. So obviously in times where we have a lot of ongoing, where we have like agile development, where we have basically agile localization, kind of the traditional scheduling has become less important. It's not that we have to build a big project schedule when we just don't have these big projects anymore. So I worked on, I think it was Office 2013, like, which was really big project. We really had to build the different phases, and some of the people who have been in the industry for a little longer, they probably remember all those handoffs, handbacks. You moved a lot of files, and we also needed to make sure that you had updates on time. With all these much faster turnaround times that are being expected today, obviously that scheduling has is less important, but we still have timelines that we all need to adhere to. So it's interesting that that was deemed the least important, or basically people did not put that as number one. So turnaround times, there are obviously different expectations on the client side. There's just the regular deliverables that we just put through our localization pipeline. So if things are working well, there should be an established pipeline for any sort of ongoing program. But even the same applies obviously for a project with a clear start and end date, you want to know when things are coming back, right? And that can be on a string level, as it is for a lot of, well, as it is basically for all software today at Microsoft. It can be on a file level. And then you have specific deliverables. I just put images and videos in there. So if you have image localization, video localization, whatever specific deliverables you might have, you would see different expectations for the turnaround times. One of the things that I think for people on the client side, they know that sometimes for us as localization organizations within a bigger company, it's sometimes hard to explain why do these translators need so much time for just translating one string. People are not familiar with a industry. They just forget about the fact that people are sitting in different time zones, and when you send out, especially when you're on the West Coast of the United States, right? People might not have started working yet in Asia. They're a day ahead of you, but they might still be asleep, and people in Europe might just be at the end of their day. So you just lose hours just through mere time zones. And then obviously there's a lot of other scheduling aspects, just the days of the week. When do you send things out? You won't get an Arabic translation possibly on a Friday. Things like that that people outside of localization normally don't keep that much in mind. So having reliable deliverable times, times for deliverables, for turnaround times, is just one important aspect for every client. And then the second one is for everything that's gone wrong. So I just put that under fixes. That could be bug fixes. That could also be a mixed up file, something that was delivered in a wrong format, all those things. So whatever you need to be addressed as an issue with those deliverables. So what are those turnaround times, especially for high priority, high severity bugs? You want to have those addressed very quickly. So all these things I would see as scheduling pieces that we need to keep in mind. There's one thing that people don't necessarily think about, and kind of, I also put it under scheduling. It's kind of a time factor. If you have to talk to key contacts, what are their response times, right? There as well, time zones play a big role. And then the question is, there some of the big LSPs, they offer models where they have people in different locations that can address issues. So this, we call it follow the sun model, where basically people would pick up work different days. And we all know that it can be really, really beneficial when people are in a different time zone, right? You have people working on a problem over your night, but it can also have exactly the contrary effect. So all these things are something to keep in mind, and that's something that I would say clients do think about, kind of how do the timelines look. I'm always having like a little note here for Microsoft. I'm actually working in a team right now where I have team members in 10 time zones. I even have we are located in Redmond, Washington, West Coast of the United States. But even that team right now, we have a team member who started working for us during the pandemic. She's in Florida. So even that is 3 hours away, right? And when she would work differently with our vendor. She's a little closer to Europe, so that makes even scheduling of calls a little easier. So all these time factors, something to think about. Then, well, a lot of you mentioned quality, and the biggest question is really, I don't want to talk about quality because it's such a big topic, right? I don't want to talk about what does it mean. how do you measure quality? The question for a client is basically, how do you as an LSP create trust in your quality? If I'm only, we have a lot of in-house native speakers, so I do get feedback on language quality, for example, and sometimes on higher levels. So I've had, well, probably not up to the VP level, which is really high at Microsoft, but maybe the level right underneath. People who were native speakers of a language and would just happen to work on a product that I localized, and they would come back to me and say, "Hey, I just found this one typo. How sure are we that our translation quality is good?" And obviously, that's only anecdotal feedback, but as localization organizations within bigger companies need to build trust with their stakeholders, so does the LSP. So the question is always, what are you doing to ensure that trust? So we cannot check all the languages. Don't know how many of you are being asked how many languages you speak just because you work in the language industry. I'm working with 39 languages. Obviously, I don't have the slightest idea about the language quality of many languages. And I also very rarely even check. I'm a native German speaker. Once in a while, I can take a look at German, but that's not. We all know that's not the way that you have a language quality program set up. So, what is the system in place between you as an LSP and your clients to basically build that trust in the quality? What are all the aspects? Why would people trust in your translators as opposed to other translators? And one important factor for that is what are the metrics that are being tracked there? I see that we're shifting a lot more from basically review metrics to customer input. So at Microsoft, that excuse me, that's become a very important factor. What are the users of our software or the visitors of our web pages saying? We do have surveys, but if we have a system in place, then how is our vendors reacting to those things? And so basically that overall system of metrics. So I think we have another poll coming up. Oh no, I have the question. Maybe some of you can just talk about that. What do you as LSP do to instill that trust in the quality of your deliverables? So especially for translation quality, but that's obviously not all. Are there specific ways of building that trust, especially in the beginning of projects? Would just be interested to see some comments if anybody wants to volunteer.
Let's give it a moment, and if someone prefers to speak, then just raise your hand and we can open your microphone. That's also possible. We're also used to talking to each other on. Oh, I see. Carlos says follow up. Let's see if there's anyone else. Yes. Okay, so I'm going to open Carlos first. Carlos,
yeah,
go
hi,
ahead.
everybody.
Hi.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, just, I mean, follow up. The reason I wrote it 3 times is because it's follow up from a number of different people. I work more in the commercial area, business development. So I follow up with our clients, but our project managers follow up with our clients, and many times our CEO will follow up with clients. And so it's just making sure the client has a constant voice inside our organization.
Okay, thank you. Let me see. I'm going to open Diego's microphone. Let's see.
Thank you, Isabella. Hi, Soren. Yeah, wait, I have no answer, but I have a question rather. Do you mean from the first project or after that one?
Well, the first project is always the most important, right? That's where you really need to build trust the quickest. But then, yes, I could have probably also do a slash here, instill and maintain trust. Because there can be moments where a client might even lose trust, right? If there's major issues. Well, we all know that trust it's basically like a bank account. And the main thing is that the withdrawals are happening much faster than the paying
That's taken
in.
from a movie, right? I don't know the title in English. I know the movie. Yeah, I'm answering an email right now for a potential project to a customer, and they ask for a sample translation. So that could be a way, even if I don't trust sample translation and tests too much, because usually you are tempted to put more effort than you would put on a normal project.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. So no answers on my side, actually. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, but the interesting thing is when you were mentioning sample translations, obviously, it is something that every LSP has further down their own supply chain as well, right? How do you trust translators? So what are the mechanisms there? And yeah, the same way that like you're monitoring them keeping up the quality, the same way clients basically expect quality to be kept up.
Absolutely. Thank you, Isabella.
Thank you, Diego. There's also an answer from Meredith, and she says, hiring a translator and a proofreader on projects with new clients, but it gets really expensive, especially for very rare languages. We don't have a copy editor in-house. So there's another answer for you.
Yeah, and it's basically instilling that trust through specific processes, right? You basically you have a process that very obviously, well, where clients would say, okay, yeah, you have 2 layers, you have somebody proofreading afterwards, so that looks a lot more reliable than just having a translator.
Okay, no more answers.
Oh, and there's a really long answer.
Oh, yes,
here.
there's one. Yes, I just saw it. It's just coming from Lucrezia. So quality, writes Lucrezia, for us is a joint work among our vendor management, PM and language support departments together with the linguists. And this includes choosing the right linguist resources, making sure they have all the tools and material they need and they know how to use them, and helping them with any query or issue that may arise. If necessary, we assign language leads to specific accounts, create glossaries, and use external QA tools for additional quality checks. Our quality control process is clearly established for every job and organized in a management system. Our linguists have all have the instructions and requirements available in this platform, and the quality of their jobs is scored in a revision stage, and the result is added to their profile. Okay, and then we have Paolo says, usually create a dedicated team involving all areas. Yeah, let's see, for nothing else for
and
now.
Yes, especially Lucrezia, what you said, those are all really great measures. It's just that the client also needs to understand that all that helps, right? So it's also a question of communicating these things, and but you also want to market that in a certain way, right? Because all these processes, they're really great if you have the internal quality, quality assurance, quality control. You obviously need to convince your clients that, yeah, those things are not just costly, right? If you have that proofreader, I would say in that case, it's probably pretty intuitive if you have 2 pairs of eyes on a set of translations. Probably don't need to do too much convincing for your client. But for a lot of those things where you put efforts into your language quality work, you also need to communicate the reason for those, because clients might just see the cost that you will eventually incur on them as well, right? When you have great programs.
Okay. Let me check because Lucretia raised her hand. Lucretia, did you want to reply to?
Yes. Hi, Soren. Hi, Isa. I wanted to say that I agree with you 100% that it's all about how you communicate this to the client. But you have to have like these kind of processes, and you have to know them and know how to explain this to your clients so they understand that we know what we are doing, right? Basically.
Yes. Yeah. And you cannot sell to people what you don't have. So
Exactly.
I mean, it's yeah. And I think that the more transparent companies are becoming, the more obvious it is. Yeah, you cannot just have your salespeople advertising a great language program when there's nothing behind it. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lucrecia. Okay, let's see. Nothing else for now.
So this is what I meant with scope. It's more about how much coverage, well, kind of just the amount of work that might not apply for a really fully defined project, like the traditional projects where you have a full lock-it and everything. But if you have an ongoing program, well, even with a project, we know that there's scope creep, right? You might suddenly get more requests, and it's not that the client's localization department might always have control over that. We might just get asked to also translate this, localize this specific new web page that somebody came up with last minute. So there might be additional work in terms of assets, but there might also be additional work, well, if we expand our language set, for example. So the question is really how scalable is everything on the LSP side, and how flexible are the teams to take on additional work. And obviously that's always a very, very tricky question. You cannot just double the amount of words to translate, but there needs to be a certain amount of flexibility, and that's something that yeah, there's probably no clearly defined expectation here, but in the heat of the everyday work, it might play a role. So then finally cost, which some of you deem the most important. Obviously, I am a program manager. I'm not in my localization organization's business department. So I'm not one of the vendor managers who obviously look at those factors a lot more. And Microsoft is so big, we have people that are working on the individual contracts with vendors for specific projects, but then we also have people who maintain the overall pricing structure. So a lot of that is pretty obsolete to me. But yeah, I would say that those people will be looking a lot more at cost, and we all know that cost is a really important factor. But yeah, I like that in our survey earlier, we also saw that people are thinking more about quality than the cost factor. So I already talked about metrics for the language quality. What is it that is being tracked? Because there can be multiple dimensions. So one of the things that I found really extremely useful is getting my hands on quite a bit of data and being able to pull that information myself. So a report is a good first step on certain key performance indicators. And it's always nice when you can sit together and you have a business review, but giving clients the opportunity to also just pull those data by themselves as needed is super important. And there's lots of dimensions, right? You can have like the traditional quality scoring, however you build your language quality score. That is one way. I worked on language quality for the Skype team for a few years, and I was always interested in seeing seeing all that information per language, possibly even drill down into a product area. So the more I could do that myself instead of relying on somebody building a report for me, the better. But quality scores are not the only thing. Obviously, just looking at kind of what kind of issues have we had, are there data available on that? Turnaround times is always an important thing. So as I said, building traditional schedules might be not as important, but timelines are as important as ever. So just being able to check these things, well, cost, if there's individual billing, if you have a like more service level contract, they would look differently, but people obviously also want to track the cost on their project. So having things that are being dynamically populated where you don't need to wait for a report, I feel that is one of the ways that you can also instill trust, because you're sharing those insights. Yeah, as I already said, like it's good to then sit together and talk about these different key performance indicators, which is probably what all of you are doing with your clients if you're working with them on a set of projects or on a given program. But well, I shouldn't assume anything. I actually do have. Well, no, I think I had a survey on something like this, but I was just wondering. From your perspective, are there data that you would feel that you should share, that you always should share, or that you do share on a regular basis?
Again, if anyone wants to talk directly to Soren, you can raise your hand and we'll open the microphone, or you can write in the chat if you feel more comfortable. Let's see. In the meantime, maybe do you want to launch the poll first?
Yeah, we can also launch the. Yeah.
Yes, let's launch the poll first and see. So.
And this is, I think this is the share. Yeah, this is the one that we've split into.
Yes.
Yes. LSP. Yeah.
So this is for the LSP side. And client side, be patient. Your time will come in a second.
And this is really where you have dashboards. So instead of even if you're sending regular reports, is there a way for your clients to take a look at your data at any given point in time?
Mm-hmm. Okay, let me close this. Okay, so here are the results. If you're on the LSP side, you share data via dashboards. 33% said yes, and 67% said no. Okay, let's do the client side. And if you're a client side, please vote. Let's see.
Yeah, it's interesting for those who don't share data on the LSP side. Is it technical obstacles that you feel you have? Would just be interesting to understand what keeps you from sharing some of those insights.
Yeah. Okay, 10 more seconds. I'm gonna close the poll. Okay, for now we have 67% says yes, and 30% says no from the client side.
Yeah, and that is a even smaller sample, so I won't hold that against the industry.
There's a comment from Paulo. He says, I must say that we do not share because it's not a requirement, and usually our clients share theirs and we talk about it. Diego
yeah,
says,
and that is probably a good argument. There are they might be tracking quite a bit of those things on their side, but I would assume that you always have data that are available on your side only. Like, for example, a lot of the internal QA processes that you mentioned, well, they were not all things that you could measure, but what Lucretia mentioned, there's probably a few things that you're tracking that your client just cannot track, right? That would still could still be interesting for them. So, and then yes, I do see that the technical constraints, just like what platform do you have to share those data? Obviously, that can be a factor. But still interesting insights here. Okay. So, so I talked about timing, scheduling. I talked about quality, scope, and cost, and kind of what data you can share on those things. I also feel there's some really important additional factors, not things that you have to keep in a balance, so to speak, but things that are really important when I think about working with clients. So the first one is obviously what tools are being used within a project, within a program. On the Microsoft end, probably because Microsoft entered field of localization very, very early. We had to build our own tools before some tools were built just for software localization. There was something called Catalog Studio at the time. We've had our own generic solutions. Microsoft has been moving away from that more and more. Well, any of you have ever worked with Microsoft, you might remember those days, and other clients might have their own generic tools. In general, I would say that's probably a lot less of an issue today. But you might still face that challenge of integrating your localization infrastructure with the one of the client, and that is probably less a problem when you have like file localization, when it's really when you still have traditional handoff handbags. But as soon as you get more dynamic, you want to have that integration, preferably with a content management systems of a client. So that is definitely something that needs to be considered. And that often requires some infrastructure investments. There's also the question, is there any tools support for the downstream partners? So the same way that often our engineers at the time had to support LSPs with the Microsoft infrastructure. The question is still, is there, do you as an LSP have support for people working with the tools? If you prescribe tools, technically, like even just for general for CAT tools, right? They should know how to use them. But is there any sort of support? Yeah, having that issue with tools preferred among multiple linguists. So the when people use a lot of different tools, right? How can you even align? Like if you have a sort of quality assurance built in that you would like everybody to run on their files, just regular checks. They are looking different across those tools, right? Can you even align that? So that's exactly that kind of challenge. As a client, we often have a lot more power to tell people what they're supposed to use on your end. It might be more difficult. For the processes, so the very kind of on a very highest level, I would say there's basically there's a model where you basically have an LSP as an extended part of a localization team. You basically have collaboration, which can get very, very manual, right? You have people basically sitting at the table with you, and they're taking on things. And you can also have like a very strict framework where work is being assigned through some sort of work management system. Things go through a very strict, standardized flow. We all know that projects never stick to the extremes. They might fluctuate between things, and even if you have a strictly defined framework, there might be a rush order. So I'm working in a fairly strict framework right now. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room, but I still have these one-off things that need to be handled, where we need to go outside of that regular framework. And so knowing kind of how that outside looks like is pretty important too. And you don't want to have like constant communication for every single deliverable, right? You want to have something that is more standardized, but you also need to be aware of the fact that there might be those exceptions. So yeah, you might have these projects where you have very clear instructions at the beginning and you basically hand over a package. You might have just unsupervised operations. That's what I'm working with for most of my actual translation work. You can have fully automated processes, but for all of those, you basically want to make sure that you can track all the deliverables. And so for that as well, do you have any ways of tracking that? Do you have any dashboards, right, that give you a quick view? And obviously, the more things are unsupervised, the more things are automated, the more important it is that you have some way of monitoring the processes. So now I want to talk about people, and I have this question. Do you think that particular individuals on a project make a difference for the results?
In the meantime, while we wait for people to vote, there is a comment from Diego in the chat. Maybe it's interesting if you want to address it.
Oh yeah, the fact that customers want standardization, and you put that in while I was talking about processes. It might also apply for even for tools. Yes, that can be quite a challenge. I mean, I've actually seen that and that is a while ago, that Microsoft's our own internal tool landscape was more diverse. So and that's over 20 years ago that I worked for a vendor, but we would see the different log organizations at Microsoft using different tools and different workflows. So yeah, that can be quite a challenge. Actually, I think it's always helpful for the client to hear about that. But yeah, if they're really not willing, that can be quite difficult.
Okay, here are the results. So 93% says yes, and only 7% says no.
So isn't that interesting? Which means that we are probably we are all aware that we are working with knowledge workers and people that have different levels of expertise and experience. So I would totally agree with that. I've seen individuals matter. So I just have two examples here. I just put this link into my presentation. Just one of the things that I found at the time when Age of Ultron, that's a few years back in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But when that movie was subtitled for China, actually the main translator was working on that kind of project. He was just coming off surgery, and the subtitles were all a lot less of less quality. So people made a lot of fun for that particular movie. So for the and then I've seen that personally, that we've seen fluctuations when we had like ongoing reviews and looked at our language quality. We would see specific languages just when the main translator on a specific project, when they were off on vacation, so during the summer month, we would see the quality go down because they had backup translators and they were just not as good. So it's really important to look at the people who are on the project. So and yeah, just for fun, I put the little skills profile in here of what I always wish that people look like, and that's that actually applies even for for my teammates, for people that are working with at Microsoft. But on the LSP side, people who are critical, obviously I don't want to have everything questions that we're doing, but just keep an open mindset on how are things being done, not making assumptions. And so we're talking about the individuals. Often people on the client side are super busy themselves and they might just misinformation. So don't build off any assumptions. Getting suggestions on how to improve is always helpful. Yeah, and I remember Diego's comment. Sometimes they might not be as open to suggestions. So obviously there's some diplomacy required. And people on the client side, they might have their own constraints, right? It might just not be possible to change things, pick another tool, or even change the workflows that they have, because they might have their dependencies on the product development teams that they're working with. But inquiring is always important. And then the passion for the project, for the client, and yeah, that actually does shine through. Can sometimes really tell how invested people are. So basically getting that, having that open mindset, being fast to learn. So especially for that first project, right? The people that you put on a project, they have some onboarding, they have some on-ramping to do. So that is pretty important. For engineers, just having that technical expertise with whatever the infrastructure might be, if they're on that side, or the products that they're working on. For the translators, I also added this understanding the product services. That is one side, so having a certain domain knowledge, and then we always expect that passion for language, but it should also not be so big that they don't want to change a term because they feel it's completely correct that way. Yeah, and Lucretia added that comment that of course it's about reading people. Yes, that is a very important important remark. You need to know kind of what are your clients open to, right? When you ask, how much do they want to be asked? So what I found actually super useful was actually when we learn a little bit about the talent pool. And it's not that you should share any data that would raise privacy concerns, but I had one vendor share the demographics of their translators with us. So like, what was their education? What was the average age? It was when we were working on Skype. And I found that extremely helpful to understand who are the people in general that are translating our products. And yeah, it also I mean, depending on the size of a client organization, sometimes people can be really removed from the supply chain, and kind of getting that a little tighter, at least in awareness, can be super helpful. While the times of in-person meetings have not fully come back yet, so if we get kickoff meetings again, that's like a little pet peeve of mine when I see that that the LSPs would send people that would not work on the projects. It's all about building these relationships and training the right people. So just sending middle management might not be the best investment. And the same, like when there is an opportunity for clients to talk, I talked about the sharing data on the talent pool, but it's also sometimes super useful to just have them talk to people that are doing some of that actual work. I don't monitor the translation quality of individual translators, but just having the insights from a translator, kind of what is it that they've been struggling with for our type of project, can be super insightful. And so, or talking to the engineers who work on a product day in, day out. So having that opportunity to sometimes just have that closer connection. And obviously, it also helps with, well, it can help with that trust building, right? You, as you say, like people do matter. You don't need to build a full relationship as a client with all these individual translators, but getting to know one or two and understanding kind of what are they coming from, I feel that it's super beneficial. So, and I was curious, have you ever shared anonymized data on your translators? I said, like one of them, one of the LSPs I've worked with has done that. So I was wondering, have you ever done that?
Okay. We're 50-50 now. Okay, 10 more seconds and then I'm going to close the poll. There's a comment from Meredith in the meantime. Okay, let's see the results. So 60% says yes and 40% says no.
Oh, that's interesting. That's actually more than I thought. That's yeah, that's great. And yes, clients might not necessarily expect that, but it can also help with that trust building that I mentioned earlier, right? So finally, communication. There's a lot of things that you need to figure out. Kind of what are the regular the communication channels for just the regular work. So how do you communicate general guidance, but then also like how do you assign work? What's the preferred thing there? And those systems can make it a lot easier or a lot harder for a client, depending on what they need to provide there. How do you communicate escalations? Is there a separate channel? And then, yes, all the business metrics. So is there a specific channel for anomalies? And then, as I said, like dashboards would be one of the easiest communication channels for just having those metrics out there. Or do you have reports, or do you only look at them when you have a quarterly business review? So all those different communication channels, and there is a difference between having a meeting, sending an email, sending an IM, or collaborating in something like Slack or Microsoft Teams, right? And then also the question, who is involved in all the conversations you're having. And since we're already 5 minutes before the end, I just want to quickly say, the landscape is changing. Clients are not necessarily bound to the traditional LSP model anymore, since continuing localization requires less project management work. There are those gig work marketplaces. So there has been thinking about the disintermediation at Microsoft. So are we talking about direct to translator? Put some CSA research, had some articles that were read a lot about it in our vendor management team. So basically thinking about what is it that is your unique selling point. So just in the level of 3-letter acronyms here. What's the LSP's USP? Just keeping those questions in mind. So if you have that full wish list covered, that might be a USP as well. And then here's my little naughty list, just from a personal perspective, as somebody working for a client. I'm not always shopping for vendors. Actually, I'm a PM. I'm not selecting any vendors. So not everybody who's working for a client is attending conferences to go shopping for a new vendor. On LinkedIn, we get tons of cold calls, or people just misunderstand. And Microsoft should be familiar enough a name, right? To ask me just to select me with a to connect people with that one person who's selecting vendors. And so the nice list is always, when you talk to people at client organizations, don't start with trying to sell, but it's always great to connect through concrete topics. That's often a lot more powerful. So yeah, I do rush a little bit through the last slides because we had already had some great conversations via chat and open microphone. But if there's any other questions, I wanted to leave a little bit of time for that.
Yeah, and again, if someone wants to ask the question directly to Soren, feel free to raise your hand and we can open the microphone. In the meantime, there are a couple of questions in the Q&A. Maybe we can have a look at one of those. Feel free to pick the one that you want to answer first. Let's start with a short one, maybe. Do you think being ISO certified helps instill trust, especially with prospect clients?
I would really say that depends on the clients. Sometimes people might not even understand the ISO certification, right? Some of the smaller clients, but yeah, I feel it's not a one fits all approach. For certain clients, that might be really, really important.
All right. What dashboards would you recommend for a new LSP using or signing up, either public facing or internal or both?
I would say probably like some of the quality metrics, whatever you're tracking. I feel that that would be good for the for the public facing. Obviously, you don't want to share anything on finances or timelines publicly, but internally that can be pretty useful as well. Well, that's it's an own webinar, right? What are the data that you want to track in a localization organization, be it an LSP or at a client? What do you constantly want to keep an eye on? I would always say, unfortunately, quality is often the measured in the lack of quality. So also tracking issues, a lot of the operational data, turnaround times. Have you met the timelines? So yeah, quite a few different things that you can track in dashboards.
Thank you. Another one is, let's say, what point in internal LSP growth does an LSP turn away smaller projects or new clients? It's from an anonymous attendee. So he says, our motto has always been to accept projects, even when we get very small profit margins, to get ourselves out there. And now 5 years in business, I'm wondering whether it is worth it. Is there any metrics you'd say to follow, or any advice that you would like to share?
I think that's a question that is really great for a lot of people in the room, but not me. I'm
Exactly.
one of the biggest clients that you can have. So I don't really know, and I don't know enough about the kind of the business management for an LSP to be able to answer that one. I think it's a really, really great question.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll do a webinar. Maybe
Yes.
we'll do a webinar on that. That's something to write down. One final, very short question. As a big organization, how can you have direct access to resources with so many middlemen in between? Do you really manage to have access and meet the actual people working on the language tasks?
I have had that opportunity, but I've really sought it out. So, and that can only be a sample, right? And it depends a little bit. So for translators, I was lucky enough. I worked with so the last time I did that was actually working with an LSP. They brought in translators that were located in the same area as them. So I could just talk to translators. Sometimes easier when you have reviewers because the set of people might be smaller, just having a call organized. But I mean, you also have a different hierarchy of people, and you have different areas. So I do think that there are opportunities, but you need to work on them. I mean, you could, I love to even just ask LSPs, can I just meet with a sample set of translators that are working on our project? And then they've organized that. And yes, it would only be a few people. And I know that we're over time. So great questions. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, we'll have you back then for more with another wish list. So thank you so much, Soren. It's been mighty interesting and very informative and useful. I've seen some comments in the chat. Everybody was really, really chuffed that you could present here. And thank you to all attendees for being so interactive, so active during the presentation. I put the link to the post-webinar survey. Please give us your feedback because it helps us refine our webinar program, and simply leave a message to Soren how great he's been. I think it would be great to know. Next webinar will be on November the 11th, and it will be presented by One Stop Asia, and it will be on all the issues related to managing projects in Asian languages when you don't speak those Asian languages. So please join us then. And for now, have a good day, have a good evening, depending on where you are. And I look forward to seeing you at another Gala webinar very soon. Thank you so much, Soren.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Bye, everyone.